Hello, 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 and welcome to an exciting episode of the Sovereign Society podcast. And I have with me here Laura Dawn and I've actually found Laura on Clubhouse. I remember we were like in a Clubhouse room together, and I think we were talking about microdosing and entrepreneurship and just talking about how we can really work with these plant medicines, not just for entrepreneurship, but for leadership as a whole, and how we have the ability to really show up and be of service and understand that when we're working, especially with these plant medicines that are coming from the earth, we are communicating with the earth on how to anchor in heaven on earth. How do we really help with the ascension process of this planet and the vibration of this place? And it's been just really fascinating that the last few conversations I've had here have been really passionate about this. So this is telling me that we're headed in the right direction, and that there's multiple people who are really driven and are inspired to really be that change and answer the call. So I want to thank you, Laura, for being here and for taking the time to share your journey and your medicine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And so I want to really dive in first and really introduce your initiation into understanding this is the path that I'm being called to really be of service. I'm here to help with microdosing and help entrepreneurs with their creative capacity and ability and just their overall expression and working through plant medicines. I want to hear your journey as to this is what I'm here to do.
Oh, okay. Well, gosh, I just feel like I am here because of plant medicines. And so, I feel like I often joke that plant medicines really hand raised me and forged me into the woman that I am today. So I have an interesting parallel track where I was raised by two entrepreneurs. And so I pitched my first business plan. Gosh, I was about 7 or 8 years old. And we used to pitch business ideas to each other by dessert at our family dinners. And then, I had my first high dose psilocybin experience when I was about 14 or 15. And also continued on to go and get a degree in finance and entrepreneurship. And I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started investing in the stock market when I was quite young, and had some really big transformational experiences with psychedelics that really helped put me on the path that I'm at. And, it's so interesting because when I speak on podcasts, it's always this sort of linear timeline, but it's not quite so linear, and it's not quite so concise. It was a bit of more of a messy journey, where still throughout those years of working with psychedelics, because we know set and setting plays such a big role and the intention plays such a big role. I was still also struggling with depression at different points throughout that, and also struggling with different substance abuse. And I had one really profound LSD journey where I literally kicked a cocaine habit in one night and never went back and never touched cocaine ever again. And after I came out of university, actually, I went really deep with really an intensive concentrated time of working a lot with psychedelics. And it felt like a very major deprogramming, and really held space out of actually, around coming in. I was investing in commodities and, literally companies that were stripping minerals from the earth and making a profit off of that. And there was a lot of grief there when I really had to just come to terms with my actions and the education that I received. And so it kind of was a little bit of a swinging in the other direction. I had hit sort of a rock bottom moment in my life, and after university, and I packed a backpack and I left and I never went back. And I ended up living out of a backpack for many, many years, traveling all over the world, going very deep with psychedelics throughout that time and exposing myself to different cultures and different ways of living. And I supported myself the whole time through that. I built my first online brand to 1.5 million people on Facebook, 1.5 million followers. And I've done a lot of the online thing, right when Facebook was just sort of new. I started getting into Facebook pages and understanding okay, Google ads and things like that. And actually it's so crazy that I ranked #1 on Google for positive quotes for many years, which is an incredibly competitive search term.
That's amazing.
And so taught myself more of yeah, more of the online realm. And then I started doing business consulting because I was right out of university and had been already, on the entrepreneurial path for years at that point. And so I've really been, self-made my whole entire life. And when I sort of swung in the other direction, where I was like very much living out of a backpack, traveling around the world, going very deep with psychedelics, I did kind of eventually come through that phase and come to like a full circle moment where it was like, the lens that I was given as a child was to look at the world through this place of entrepreneurship, which isn't like a dirty word. Business isn't like a dirty word. It's all in how we choose to show up and engage with it. And I grew up with entrepreneurs at a time where, it wasn't really cool to like have parents as entrepreneurs. Like now we're in a revolution. We're in an entrepreneur revolution where everyone's stepping out of the cubicle. But for the last 2 decades, even just 10 years ago, it was very different than it is now. And so I really came full circle and realized that, I was just so blessed to be given the gift, the lens of looking at the world through that mindset. And how can I, and which the mindset is really opportunity. And I think that that's like the spiritual component of entrepreneurship that I bring to the table, is like when we are facing so many crises and challenges in our day-to-day reality in a world through and post COVID, like how do we perceive possibility where we previously saw lack and limitation? And I really feel like that was the lens that was given to me as a child. And I did eventually come full circle in my life where it was like, okay, I can really catalyze what's in my DNA, which is like, being an entrepreneur, and also incorporate over 2 decades of exploring altered states of consciousness and the lessons that I've received directly from plant medicines to be a force for positive influence in this world. And so I know that was like a very long-winded answer, but I feel like it kind of gave a little bit more of the complete picture of where I'm at today. And I could go on, but I'll just pause there and see where you want to take this conversation.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Yeah. I mean, that's really powerful. And I think that's the great thing that we can start to see is like with what we're here to do, how can we start grabbing the pieces together of how far we've come and the things that really lit us up at those younger ages and the things that, we really resonated with and really have embodied. And I think that's the big thing of what we do is like based off of our journey of what's brought us here thus far. What lessons have we integrated? What have we embodied? What are we? And then from that space, how can we share? Because I do think we're living in times right now as well, where we are going back to the core of like what's important. We are going back to the core of what's moved us and what's inspired us. And then from our experience, how can we lead? Maybe, like we're not anyone's guru, but like we have the ability to help people understand that like, hey, if I can do this, so can you. And I think that's the beautiful piece is that, especially with the rise of psychedelics, and, a lot of us were using it not so necessarily for entrepreneurial experiences in the beginning, but we were doing it to discover who we were. We were doing it more so to find who we were, to dive in deeper, to maybe heal ancestral traumas, our own traumas, that's very much my experience with PTSD. I was calling suicide hotlines, and then I started working with psychedelics, and that helped me. That was my first connection to God, like on the dance floor. And I knew that was part of my mission here. It was like, how am I here to help anchor heaven on earth? And at that time I was a music journalist. And so while that journey has evolved over the time, like now getting to talk with people like you who get to share their journey and to share the medicine and the wisdom that's really helped them get to this space. That's the big thing I really want everyone to understand is that the lone wolf days are over and that we have the ability. And I do feel like there's such an uprise of interest and curiosity around psychedelics because like the plants are speaking to us. They want us to understand that like, hey, we came here on mission and we want to help you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's so interesting because in episode number 3, so I have the Psychedelic Leadership podcast, I interviewed Dennis McKenna, who's one of the world's leading ethnopharmacologists. We talk about the pharmacology of ayahuasca, but particularly Banisteriopsis caapi, ayahuasca vine, different than the brew together. But we talked about that, and in that episode he says like plant medicines are the neurotransmitters of the Gaian mind, and I just love the way he's such a genius and is also just so poetic.
Incredible.
And I love that. I mean, it is kind of amazing that we just so happen to have neuroreceptor sites that fit these molecules that completely transform our consciousness and that fundamentally allow us to become better leaders and more heart-centered human beings. And not that in and of itself, they're a powerful tool, but they cannot change your personality unless you want to be changed, unless you combine your experiences within a larger framework, within different modalities of understanding the mind, the body, healing modalities that really allow us to move more in that direction. And that's really sort of the essence of the combination of what I'm on a mission here to do, honestly.
I love that. And I think it's, like I said, it's been so fascinating that all of my conversations lately have been around psychedelics, something that's really helped me overcome trauma and healing. And here I am, like 3 weeks ago, I lost my memory. And an hour before this call, I was getting an EEG scan on my brain, seeing how the brain waves and things are functioning and moving. And next week I have a CAT scan. But I know for me, like, those medicines have really helped me. They've helped me overcome trauma. They've helped me overcome depression. And so it's really fascinating because people who don't understand it, they're the first to criticize or to like blame something they don't understand. But then when you look at the science, which I'm like praying that more and more of that is being exposed and more of that is being read upon and really delivered to the collective, I definitely believe that with where we're going, like things are going to be changing very soon. Like, I do believe we are the generation that's like saying we're going for this. And this is what we're doing, because I've had people on this podcast, like I had Amanda Elise here, and she's bringing essentially combo medicine, which is the frog venom, to African-American communities to help heal generational trauma. We are having more and more research about what is happening. Dennis McKenna, we've got Michael Pollan, who just had his whole book talking about the research and everything. And so, I don't know, I'm feeling really grateful that with the advancement of technology and the internet, there is more information accessible to understand what's going on, that we can really, and people in these generations and then generations to come who are becoming doctors, who are becoming researchers, they're going to be more driven to bring these medicines forward and to make a stand to allow this, like, psychedelics are the future and the now.
Well, they're part of the future. They're definitely going to be a bigger part of our future.
Yep. And so I'm really looking forward to continue to see like people like you who are using psychedelics in leadership, see more of that be the conversation. And of course, everyone has their own free will. They don't have to do psychedelics to be in leadership. But a lot of us who have been diving in and working with these medicines for a long time, we're still recognizing and paying reverence to the sacred ceremony, the sacred medicines. And I also pray that there is a beautiful preservation of these lands and this medicine as well. And I think that's another like big topic to talk about as well, is that they're not just like mass forged. And how do we continue to have a preservation of it?
Yeah, that's a huge topic. And, I'm so big in just like, offering feedback and just putting things on the table around, lifting each other up and even just introducing different shifts around semantics. And so inviting people to explore, instead of saying using psychedelics, to start seeing if it feels more true or more harmonious, resonant alignment with your whole being to say, working with psychedelics. Or, from more of that place, because it's like, okay, so we live within this Western culture that's patriarchal, capitalistic culture, and it's easy to just have that mindset sort of ripple out into the ways that we work with psychedelics. And so just inviting a shift there, just pointing it out for people who are listening to just become mindful about even the way that we're talking about relating to these very powerful substances.
Yeah, and I appreciate
actually,
that.
I had a great conversation. Yeah, there was it used to be called the Sabina Project, now called the Ancestors Project. I was interviewing Charlotte and Dre for episode number 10 of the podcast, and it was on psychedelics and anti-racism. And Charlotte had this like realization in the conversation that I also hadn't considered, but she was like, so many people say tripping, but like literally the word tripping is like tripping over yourself versus like journeying, taking a journey. We're moving more gracefully through these psychedelic landscapes. And yes, there's definitely flailing that happens along the way, but it was just interesting to hear her perspective on that. I'm like, oh, and that really struck me. And just the words that we choose really do shape our experiences of psychedelics. So
well, that's part of the leadership skills as well, right? Like if as a leader, if more than these people are doing it, just to bring that kind of awareness to how people think. And maybe not even just talking about psychedelics, but where else in their semantics are they also using words that aren't as supportive? And I think that's been a huge thing that that has been an awareness that I've at least seen of like the people I follow, the people I communicate with, is that your words have power. And there's a reason why it's called spelling, like you're casting spells with what you're saying. And yes, there's a coding that can happen in a programming in that sense as well. And so having conversations like that or speaking like that, this is how we're really paving a really integrous and solid path towards these radical shifts that can be revolutionary and really beneficial for the future in whatever way you want to work with it or not.
And it's so interesting because even a few years ago, you never heard anyone talking about plant medicine integration. And now it's everywhere. You hear it's becoming part of our culture, of our vernacular. There's plant medicine integration training programs now.
Right.
You can be a plant medicine integration coach. I mean, it's really, the movement is accelerating, and it's also a wide open space. Right. And there's, a lot of room for everyone to bring their perspective to the table.
And more than just integration, I think it's also more people talking about the importance of set and setting. I had Sarah Gale on here, one of my first guests, who's she runs the Zendo project with maps. And we were talking a lot about set and setting. Because when I had my first difficult journey, my first difficult experience that really had me come face to face on the things that I needed to work with and address, it was very big on making sure that like I didn't have the proper set and setting. And I think for us to continue to pave the path forward and to continue to, like I said, be pioneers. Well, there have been pioneers before us, but pioneers of really having this be integrated into our society where it isn't so taboo or like so off the rocker or whatever people may believe. We like, these are the things, because I have a woman right now, one of my clients, she actually does plant medicine integration, and she's doing a whole workshop and course about that. And so these are things that I know I wish I knew or I had when I first embarked on the journey. But I think that's the other thing too, is that we are here to lead based off of like maybe what we needed at one time, right? This is how we can be of service. It's like, where was that when I needed it? And it's like, oh, but I went through this like wild ride, this wild journey that I've been able to integrate it, embody it. And now I'm here to serve and help other people. So again, let them know that the lone wolf days are over. Let them know that, they are supported. And I think if we can, before this really takes off, and I know it has taken off, but like really, really takes off, these are the things that we need to really, respect and honor, is the integration, is the set and setting, is being aware, especially if you're working with ayahuasca, peyote, who you're working with. Those are big pieces. Yeah. I know for me, because when I did ayahuasca, the medicine told me strike one, strike two when I worked with the same people. Like the medicine was like, this is not who you're here to work with. And then from that point on, I made it a conscious decision to make sure that I'm working with indigenous if I'm going into deeper ceremonies like peyote or ayahuasca. And so I know I've saw on your website too, you've talked a lot about the importance of really vetting your shaman. And so I would love to also talk about that, because these are the conversations that we need, where we are diving into these ceremonies and embarking on these journeys with reverence. To me, that's what that feels like.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, do you want me to get into some of those suggestions? There's, I mean, in
Yeah, I
this
would love, I mean,
guide
that's the thing.
has,
It's just, it's more so, I just want to share, like you to share even like your take on the importance of vetting shamans and being very
yeah.
discerning on who you're working with and making sure that you feel safe. And when you're going into these deeper
Yeah.
journeys.
Yeah. So on the guide, there's over 40 questions. And of course, that might be overkill. And of course, there are other questions that are not on there that might be very applicable to you. So there are some really big red flags that you want to be careful of. And just to speak on the broader macro sense, it's really like, because especially for shamans, quote unquote shamans, people who call themselves shamans, there is the emergence of what we call ayahuasca tourism. So a lot of people are thinking like, oh, I want to go down to Peru, I want to have an quote unquote authentic experience. And you have to be careful because people can play the part very easily, and I know that this is really controversial in and of itself to say, and I'm not like married or attached to this belief system. I'm just putting it on the table. But I think with this emergence of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines, there's also this tendency to, I think, over glorify indigenous cultures. And with that, lots of people are going down to South America, and you see a little brown man speaking Spanish that is wearing, Shipibo clothing. And they also know that there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of this quote unquote industry right now. So it really does require discernment. And we're facing a mental health crisis. We're facing a meaning crisis in our lives, in the collective. And people are willing to pay a lot of money to find healing. And not that we shouldn't, healing, when we go through these transformational experiences, they're priceless. And it takes decades to become a qualified, quote unquote, qualified, experienced person who really knows how to navigate just all the things that come up through ceremony. And so, not just vetting your guide, but vetting the retreat center that you're looking at going to. And I mean, I can't even begin to tell you some of the craziest stories, about what I've seen over the past couple of decades. And people are becoming more aware of what to ask, And so one of the questions is like, when you're having a conversation, and first of all, like, shamans and guides and facilitators, they're humans too. So it's like, of course, you want to talk to them and kind of get a sense. And the biggest thing you go on is really the vibe, the frequency, the gut feeling that you get. And using these questions to kind of guide those conversations, like, how long have you been facilitating? How many ceremonies have you facilitated? Did you work with someone else before you started facilitating? What were some of the most challenging things that you've encountered? How did you navigate those challenging experiences? Some logistics, like if you're going to work with like an ayahuasquero and going to sit in medicine ceremony, how many assistants do they have per participant in the circle? So you want to have at least one assistant per 6 to 8 people. That's becoming a little bit more common standard. And then there's all the safety things. We want to, I mean, it's just like, there's such a wide landscape, especially for iboga. You could go and drink and consume iboga in the in Africa, in Gabon, in tribes, or you can like do it in a clinical setting. So everyone's got to find out like what is going to be optimal for them with psilocybin. Some people are going to work in like therapist's office versus, circles that are happening in living rooms. Same with ayahuasca. And so I think that there is a lot of options being offered to really suit a lot of different people's needs. And we have to kind of tune in with what we're being called to. There's no one right way. Some people are going to feel really called to work with indigenous cultures, the mestizos or, shipibos, and that's not necessarily the highest way. There is no, hierarchy here. I know so many people holding space in the US who do such an amazing job. And a lot of people who don't. So we just have
Mhm.
to be careful, asking like, I've heard now that there's people, holding ayahuasca ceremonies where they put on electronic dance music and they dance the whole time, And so like, am I going to judge that and say that that's wrong? I don't know if I'd want to do that, but
Mhm.
like these are some questions that we want to know what we're signing up for. And then I
Mhm.
think the other sort of two big areas that people are not asking about is reciprocity. Um, well, three big areas: reciprocity, sustainability, as well as accessibility. So, how are you as a retreat center making this medicine accessible for BIPOC communities? That's a really
Mhm.
great question. How are you guys? Where are you sourcing your materials? Are you replanting? Are you engaged in sustainable growing practices? The sustainability factor is huge.
Mhm.
Tim Ferriss just came out with a big article about, the big ones, like specifically iboga and 5-MeO DMT with bufo frog. Western
Right.
culture has a way of strangling the shit out of the things that we love the most, and
Mhm.
to our own detriment. And so we really do need to focus on replanting. And then the other piece is reciprocity. If you're working with people and you're carrying a lineage, not even to say that you have to carry a lineage, because there are some people in the community that would say that, you're not right. This is wrong if you are carrying plant medicines without the permission of an elder or a lineage. I'm not necessarily in that camp of belief system. I like to think that there are more possibilities there. But if you are receiving money, and not because you have to donate back to funds, but give back because fundamentally we want to create a more harmonious chapter of human history, and fundamentally because you stand for equality and social justice. Give back to the communities who are struggling more through COVID. These are just like common human, humanity, connect to our common humanity here. And so those are just some, I mean, like I said, you can grab the guide on my website, but there are so many questions you can go into. And it's not just for shamans, but for facilitators as well, holding any kind of space.
Mhm. I think it's really beautiful that you were talking about the importance that people are looking for meaning. And I think after this huge reset we've had, with the 2020 and what's going on, people are understanding that they want to live their life to the fullest and they want to embody their truth and they want to really answer the call, and the importance of finding that within, and I think that's the other thing that we need to also like remember is that these plants are working with us, right? And so they're helping you find that within yourself. Because I think so many people have just been looking for things outside of them. Like there's like the whole damsel in distress conditioning that's been going on. And these medicines will come to you when you're ready, if you're open to it. You know what I mean? Like if you're calling it, they will find their way to you when you're ready. But the big piece is, like we were saying, is the practicing of that discernment, that gut instinct of knowing like who you're going to work with. Because there are people who
Mhm. And
you
what
may
what kind of
resonate with.
environment that feels the most comfortable,
Totally.
because everyone's gonna have a different set and setting that they prefer. And that's not even to also like completely bypass quote unquote recreational use,
Right.
in terms of like you expressed you had one of your first experiences on a dance floor. That's an incredibly profound and potential transformational experience.
I wrote a whole book about all of my psychedelic journeys. It's in the process of being edited right now. Because, like I said, I think the more people are courageous enough to speak up and to share the things that have actually helped them, this is
Mhm.
where we have the power to be the change and we have the power to be the solution. And it takes a courageous person to speak on their experience, to share their challenges, of what's happened, and to share vulnerably, when journeys were beautiful and expansive, and when they were challenging, that led to deep lessons that made you a stronger, more compassionate person. I think those are the other
Mhm.
pieces too, is that we need to make sure that people also feel safe to express when they had difficult
Mhm.
experiences as well.
Mhm.
Because to me, like when I had a difficult LSD trip, and I'm almost coming up to the 9-year anniversary of that, and I decided, like, to me in the past, April has always been a really challenging month. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not allowing that story to rule anymore, because I've learned a lot from that experience and it's made me who I am. And I do think that's part of the integration process as well. Maybe it doesn't have to be so much like right after you embarked on that journey or in that ceremony, but the integration can come who knows how long. You know, to me, it felt like the medicine was working for me, through me, and with me beyond just like the day that it, like, you know, I like wasn't necessarily on that journey anymore. There were things that were still being processed and things that are being worked through, that's again allowed me to be that teacher, that it's allowed me to lead, that it's allowed me to cultivate a safe space for other people to come to as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how do we leverage our experiences so that we can be a force for positive influence in the world? And that's really the work that I mostly do. You know, I have sort of some kind of key circles of people that I work with, but the majority of people I work with are entrepreneurs, you know, people who are doing plant medicine integration with entrepreneurs and coaching around microdosing, you know. And so I actually have a really big 3-month program coming up this June, July, and August called Microdosing Mastermind. And it overlaps three key areas. You know, one is taking a microdosing to the next level, because a lot of people, I have so many people reaching out now being like, I'm a coach, I'm a transformational coach, I'm really interested in weaving microdosing into my offering. And then I'll ask people, you know, well, like, what does your practice look like? And they're like, well, I just started microdosing, you know. And most of the programs out there are very basic. They just cover the basics of microdosing. If you want to know the basics, you know, I put a free 8-day course on my website that just covers a lot of the most commonly frequently asked questions. Now, it's still a very comprehensive course, and that's why I put it for free, because I want to work with people who go beyond that, who want to go beyond that and deepening more of a practice. And one of the things that we learn that I've been training through embodied leadership is that through the Strozzi Institute, I really have been appreciating their training programs. And they say, you know, we become what we practice, and we're always practicing something. So the cultivation of daily practices, in my perspective, is really the path of mastery. And when we learn how to work with our daily practices, specifically designed within a modality to like tap into flow states and to unlock our greater degrees of creativity in our lives, and then combine that with really, you know, strategy, and how do we, you know, like literally come together with other people and learn how to like launch a coaching business and do all the pieces, and how do we, you know, do all the branding and the social media and all of that piece too. And so it's actually a really unique program that has a lot of entrepreneurs coming together who are all about deepening their microdosing practice, are also interested in entrepreneurship, and also interested in optimal performance. And so it has this whole other piece around, you know, body, mind, heart upgrade.
I love that. And I mean, it's interesting because I know that's been a huge thing that's helped me with my business and my creative flow, and really tapping into how I'm being asked to be of service has been through microdosing. I know you've had a huge journey microdosing ayahuasca. My medicine has always been psilocybin. And it's funny because Maria Sabina, my name's Sabrina Maria. And so I've always felt this like beautiful connection with this beautiful leader. Maria Sabina was like one of the pioneers, the pioneer of psilocybin. And so I just always thought that was like, oh, you can't make this shit up. But I would love to hear, you know, what was the call for you to work specifically to start journeying and microdosing with ayahuasca to help you with your creative flow, with your business, and your initiation to up level and to really take your service to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I started intuitively microdosing psilocybin when I was in high school. I really hated school. I just kind of wanted to go all the way back there. But while I was having these like really high dose experiences, and I really hated institutionalized education, I did find that when I would just have little nibbles of psilocybin and go to school, it was like much more enjoyable and manageable, and I could actually like pay attention. But over the years, so I have really in-depth experience working with the full range of microdosing substances. And I just do want to put a disclaimer on here that microdosing is not for everyone and there are risks. And I'm not, advocating for the use of microdosing. I think everyone needs to learn how to take radical responsibility for what they put with their hand in their mouth, especially when it comes to illegal substances. So I just want to state that. And if you do have any questions, and that's why it's really important. And I feel the call to support more microdosing coaches because people need to know the risks. And if you're, that's a huge red flag. If you're working with a microdosing coach who has not done a medical intake form, that's also going back to vet your shaman for retreats and facilitators. If you're working with anyone in any capacity, microdosing or macrodosing, who is not really doing a comprehensive medical intake form, then that's a big red flag. And not a lot of people, it's like, okay, so once you receive a medical intake form and someone has all these medications on there that you have no idea, and you're not a medical doctor, how do you work with that? And especially when we start talking about microdosing ayahuasca vine, it's an MAOI. We need to be more aware. There are more contraindications. There are actually more risks to microdosing with ayahuasca vine than with psilocybin, for example, especially if you're on SSRIs. So These are really big topics that people, think, oh, no big deal. Like, I'm just going to help support people with microdosing psilocybin. But actually, what's really common when people start microdosing is that they start moving a lot of emotional energy, and past traumas can come up and PTSD can be re-triggered. There's a lot that people still need to be very aware of. So I know I didn't really even answer your question, but I just think that just starting there is really important. But I started making my own medicine about, gosh, it's been almost a decade now. And so one thing I also want to state is that Banisteriopsis caapi, that's the Latin name for ayahuasca vine. Banisteriopsis caapi is legal in the US. And when we start looking at some of the benefits and challenges of microdosing, I have an episode I'm going to be releasing with Thomas Anderson, who's a microdosing researcher. One of the main challenges to microdosing that people reported, about 33% of people. So it's like benefits and drawbacks. Biggest drawback, legalities. There's a lot of people who are really afraid still of the legalities of getting caught procuring illegal substances. And one of the amazing things is that Banisteriopsis caapi is legal. That being said, there are other major things that need to be brought to the table. I know there's a lot of people who are very upset with me being a white woman supporting people in microdosing ayahuasca vine. That's a very controversial, touchy subject, especially for certain people. That aside, and I'm aware that that's controversial, and I have my own feelings and thoughts and opinions about that. But I have found that over the years, microdosing ayahuasca vine has been my channel. It's the frequency that really makes me come alive and that allows me to tap into a force that's greater than myself, and let alone, healing me from depression, helping me with addiction. I actually got sick with COVID a year and a half ago, and I fell into a severe depression. The whole time I was sick with the virus. And I'll just say that I never got tested because I was in Costa Rica. So I'm not 100% sure that it was COVID, although it was the worst virus I've ever gotten sick with in my life. So that's disclaimer. But I felt the whole time that I was sick, I had, for the first 4 days, I had 105, 104 degree fever. And after that, I had 3 months of chronic fatigue. And it was, for someone who's an entrepreneur and creating full force every day, I just come out of the most successful retreat of my 10-year retreat career, and so it was really hard to actually navigate that. And microdosing the vine helped heal my brain. The whole time I was sick, I was saying to my partner, I feel like this virus is attacking my brain. Like it was severe brain fog and really just lower cognitive function. And I just, and it actually got really bad. It was to a point where I had thoughts of suicide. I was like, wow, kill me now. This is fucking terrible. And I don't want to, I don't know how long this is going to last for. And I was able to come back and start a new microdosing protocol. And it immediately started helping. And I see this with so many of the clients that I work with. And, it's a powerful plant medicine. And so I know that there's a lot of controversy around it. And I'm also of the belief that we're facing the worst mental health crisis of human history, and that this is like really an all hands on deck kind of situation.
100%
And if
agree.
there's medicine that helps people fucking heal and live, I'm going to vote for that. And
Right.
yes, I'll take into consideration the other things that people are saying. And like, I'm going to go for vote for life, vote for people waking up to their potential. I vote for people, because anyone who's listening to this who has ever suffered from depression and addiction, it's like being thrown into a small dark room where you're just going round and round with self. Like there's no room to think about creating. There's no room for that. Like when I was suffering from addiction and depression, my whole reality was like the size of a postage stamp. Like that was my mind, was just right there caught in the loop. And then when you work with plant medicines and they offer you an out, a door, you're able to reach for the door, and they can just show you the door, and you still have to be the one that walks through it, but then when you're literally standing at the door after feeling like locked in a cage in a small dark room where you're just kind of ruminating around and round with self. And when you are literally at the doorway and you're looking out and realizing that there's a whole world out there, then the question becomes, now what? Now what do I do with my life? Now that I'm not so self-absorbed with my addiction, I want to do something. And now all of a sudden I have all this freed up energy to create, to inspire, to influence, to share my message, to create a platform to share, and that's what I'm really interested in. And just to really go deeper into this, is that like the whole conversation around psychedelics right now is very much so focused on psychedelics as a healing, as a cure, as a healing tool for depression, PTSD, anxiety, and addiction. And hallelujah for that. Thank God for that. And that's what's allowing the doorways to open towards legalization, towards FDA approval. Of course, that's going to be the entry. But then what? And so I'm really interested in holding space for the conversation around then what, and that's why, because, I've been running transformational retreats for 10 years and I'm on a hiatus with COVID, I'm back in graduate school and I'm getting a master's in science in a program called Creativity Studies and Change Leadership. And I'm really interested in researching the overlap and intersection between creative problem solving and psychedelics, and working with people who have platforms of influence and teaching them how do we work with and leverage these experiences with psychedelics to find solutions to some of the biggest challenges we collectively face, because we are actually we're on the precipice. We're actually
Totally.
past the precipice. We've been hurled into, about to hit rock bottom. And so that's really my mission. And I'm not a huge fan of institutionalized education, but the other thing I'm really passionate about is that this whole space of optimal performance, creativity, flow states, psychedelics, microdosing is a conversation that is predominantly held by men. And so, if I have to go and get a master's in science to elevate my platform, because I'm like literally elbowing my way to get a seat at the table, then that's what I'm going to do.
Never stop a woman on mission, man. I love it. I think it's really beautiful to see how this is how you're choosing to take initiative and really answer the call, because I know, just to really wrap up, I know you've been really passionate about speaking on the visionary archetype as well. And so I would love for you to share more about that, and how your vision of how you see plant medicines being reverenced, respected, and appreciated, in not even more so in the mainstream, but just in our overall human experience. I would love to hear more about what that means to you, and how you're really choosing to take initiative. Even, we've been talking so much about it in this conversation about your vision for what it is, but how do you see that as part of the solution?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll just share briefly a framework that I've been developing for many years. And I feel like it's a companion guide, it's a roadmap for this psychedelic path, for the medicine path. And it's called the Path of the Creative Visionary Bodhisattva. And so I'll start with Bodhisattva is, the way of the compassionate warrior. And it's someone, and I'm not calling myself a Bodhisattva, I'm just, aspiring to walk the path of someone who's willing to dedicate their own life to waking up with the intention of helping other people wake up to their own purpose on this planet. And it really takes a lot of courage to walk that path. And there's thousands of years of teachings that help support us on this path that are, not religious or dogmatic, but just like pure wisdom, good advice for this time of chaos and crisis and upheaval, so that we can learn how to stay open in the face of suffering, because a lot of people are suffering right now. And so how do we face the amount of crisis without completely retracting and contracting and looking and pulling away because it's too painful to see what's happening? And as soon as we sort of pull back in, that's defeat. It's a losing game. We're creating separation instead of reaching out a hand to help the people who are suffering. And we do that ultimately first by helping ourselves, And so the visionary piece is someone who really understands that we can learn to leverage the power of our mind and that we see what we believe. And so we have to take a leap of faith in the inner realms of our own mind. And when you talked about challenging journeys, when you go into the cocoon of metamorphosis, when you're in the darkness, when you're in the abyss, that is actually the moment that you plant your seed in possibility. That's where you can take those mental leaps of faith, where you literally can hold a vision beyond the circumstances in this 3D reality, where you literally can train yourself to expand the boundaries of what you believe is possible. And then the creative part is what I call, the visionary is eye to the sky, but give it birth to the earth. And your body is a creative channel, and we're all creative beings by definition of being alive. So how am I literally creating a bridge from the unseen dimension? Because everything we see in this 3D reality emanates from source. It's frequency, it's vibration, it's energy, and it transmutes from the unseen realm into this realm. And so really the creativity part is like, my body is a channel, is a vessel for literally transmuting ideas, visions, inner visions, and anchoring them, transmuting them into reality for not just the benefit of me, but for the benefit of humanity. And that's the Bodhisattva part. And that's the roadmap that I use for all the programs that I teach. It's a very central component of especially even the Microdosing Mastermind, because, and looking at that, like the plant medicines are the bridge between this reality and another dimension of reality that is also here with us all the time. And so we look at these ways that we build bridges so that we can have one foot in the spirit realm, quantum realm, whatever you want to call it, and one foot in this solid 3D reality. And so that channel of creativity, that's the bridge too, of transmuting the unseen into the seen. And that's the framework essentially. So I just broadened it, but the visionary piece is a central component. And it's no coincidence that as we face this time of crisis, where Einstein said we cannot solve our problems at the same level of thinking that created them, we need to take mental leaps of faith right now. And that we have this vine that indigenous cultures call the visionary vine. And that these visions that I've received through ceremony after ceremony, that I've received these visions to build a retreat center. I built a fucking retreat center from scratch with my bare hands, from a vision that came through. And that vision shaped me and who I am. And, I didn't do it alone. I did it with my ex-partner and a couple other people who helped. But it was this vision that really came through the plant medicine, the neurotransmitters of the Gaian mind, and so how we create, how the narratives we tell. So I'm telling a narrative here, and a narrative creates a cohesive storyline that allows people to have a conceptual framework. And when you do have a conceptual framework, it draws that closer into your perceptual field of awareness. It makes it more real. So I'm teaching these frameworks that weaves science and research and literature with mysticism, what the mystics have known for thousands of years. And I have a ball doing it.
You do what you love, right? This is what we're here to do. We're here to do the things that are expansive, the things that can implement real change, that can activate a legacy that goes beyond just this lifetime. And I really am just really grateful how you've just been talking more so about like the 3D as well, because everyone's been on this like go 5D and stuff, but we are multidimensional beings. And like,
Oh yeah.
I just had a whole podcast with one of my one-on-one clients, who's a lawyer, and we were talking about, you know, the legality pieces and what we need for business. And we had to remember that if we are always so like airy fairy, like spiritual stuff, but we're not actually recognizing the reality of our feet on the ground right now, you're setting yourself up for disaster as well. And so we need to understand we are multidimensional beings that are here. We came here during this time to implement real change, to answer the call, to put the pieces together. And so you are doing such an incredible job. And I just thank you for, because I feel your passion just talking to this whole conversation. I just feel your passion, your amount of awareness, your education, and this is how you're choosing to be a leader. And so I really appreciate that, because the more people that we have that take that initiative and really show up and speak, again, this is how we're going to implement the real change. And so I just want to close out this episode with a quick little lightning round questions. What does sovereignty mean to you?
Mm. Hmm. Sovereignty means that I get to choose how I influence my own consciousness and that I have cognitive liberty.
That's so beautiful. Cognitive liberty. Mind blown right there. That's so amazing. What would you say to younger Laura?
Hmm. Mm. That's such an interesting question. Hold it all lightly. Hold it all lightly. Don't take any of it too seriously. And that, you know, it's going to fly by, because it does.
What animal totem has really been guiding you and supporting you lately?
Oh, I am immersed in owl realm. I see owls are my guardians. They're on this land. I see them every day. They hang out on my roof when I go to bed at night. And so, yeah, and owl medicine all the way.
And where can we find more of you?
And you know what I'll just say about the owl medicine is, you know, they're also very significant of visionaries, because they
Right.
fly in the dark. You know,
So there's no accident there.
People can find me Right. My home base is livefreelaurid.com. I have music playlists for psychedelic journeys that people can swipe for free. I also have my free 8-day microdosing course. Really encourage anyone who's listening to this, who's an entrepreneur who wants to up their microdosing practice and also learn more about peak performance, optimal performance in personal and professional lives, to check out my Microdosing Mastermind. I already have an exceptional group of people coming together for that. So definitely check that out. And the Psychedelic Leadership podcast. And if I may, there's one thing I would love to actually add about this notion of leadership in the psychedelic space, is that, you know, it's crucial that, you know, we have to be careful about this like movement of self-proclaimed expertise, you know, and just really encouraging everyone who is choosing to walk on the medicine path to be a lifelong student, and to really surround yourself with peers and elders who offer wisdom and who can support you on your journey. And to remember that everyone, even someone, you know, who's microdosing for the first time, or having a client who's in a first time journey, we learn from everyone. We learn from everyone. Everyone is our teacher. And that, you know, we have to be careful around how we hold this notion of leadership, especially in the psychedelic space. And so I did really just want to sort of end on that note too, is like, dedicate to your own lifelong journey of learning, of growth, of transformation, because we never arrive, we never get there. We're in process, and that's okay. And that's what makes life worth living. It's each step we take along the way.
It's really funny, because my next question was what little nugget of wisdom do you have? And you already read my mind on that. And so I really appreciate you again, Laura, for just sharing all of your wisdom, and looking forward to see how this journey continues to unfold as more and more people open themselves up to embark on this journey, as more and more people open themselves up to to be in their sovereignty and that cognitive liberty. Oh, so beautiful. And I just really appreciate, again, the work and the medicine that you are sharing. And I believe we've only really scratched the surface on what's possible with psychedelic therapy, microdosing, and all these things. And thank you again for being a leader and for sharing all that you shared in this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Love the work that you're doing too. So
Thank you
thank you
so
for all the work
much.
that you're contributing. Mm-hmm.
And thanks everyone for tuning in. Go check out Laura. And again, if you are hearing the call to start to infuse more of the microdosing inside your entrepreneurial path, like do it with reverence, do it with integrity, and trust yourself. And as I always say, honor the journey and trust the process. And so we love you. We thank you. And we'll be seeing more of you soon. Take care.